Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dipo, as Demola has said, and I'll just be taking us today on project management fundamentals. It's really to give everybody an overview of what project management is, some of the tools that we use in project management, and how you can apply project management to your projects in whatever field or whatever industry you are in. So today, like I said, we'll go through project management and look at the different aspects we have to project management, right? So we start from project management lifecycle, the different methodologies you have in project management, because I'm sure many of you have heard buzzwords like agile, waterfall, Scrum, Kanban. Those words are, I would say, very, very much in use in professional settings right now. So I'll try to give an overview of what these things are. And hopefully, by the end of the session, you'll be able to communicate with, using these terms and also apply some of these tools to your work, right? So we'll do introduction, the life cycle, methodology. We'll also have a demo using one of the project management software called Jira. I'll just try to, go through what the actual use of Kanban and Scrum looks like in daily life. And then we would also speak a little on what project management certifications they are in case you want to further your project management journey, right? Yeah, so a little bit about me. I have quite a number of years experience in delivering technology projects and solutions to enterprise customers. So my career has gone through a couple of phases. I've worked as project management, program management, vendor management, product management in different industry. So from telecommunications to oil and gas, manufacturing, and financial services. My background is in computer science and telecommunications, and I am currently a vice president in technical program management for MSCI, which is a financial services company. And I really work right now on delivering technology projects and programs. So that's just a little introduction for me. So I will try to keep the session under an hour, so we have that time for the demo at the end of the session, and also in case you have any questions. So what exactly is a project? I think that's a very important place to start, because a lot of people use the term projects for everyday life, and it's good to understand when you're speaking to other people or professionals in the industry what you mean by projects. So they are depending on the organization where you kind of lean towards, or whatever methodology you lean towards. There are different ways people define projects, but what I've done here is look at what are the common parameters for a project, right? So a project is a unique temporary endeavor undertaken to achieve planned objectives. I think that line itself captures basically what a project is. It's unique, meaning it's not something you repeat as part of your daily business. It's temporary, means it has a defined start and a defined end, and it is defined by specific unique deliverables, which means you are using the project to get something done or generate some kind of value or outcome for yourself or for the business, right? And it's very important when you are looking at projects to make sure that the project or whatever activities you are involved in meets this criteria before you call it a project, right? So something that you do every day, it might be a big task, but you do it every day. It's part of your business as usual. Probably falls under operations and is not a project. You probably be able to apply some project management, tools or skills to it, but in essence, it's not a project, right? So a project needs to meet these three criteria for you to really define it as a project. So for example, you are implementing a new learning and development software for your organization. You don't have one before, or you had one before and you are bringing one in. Now, it's not that activity is a project because it's temporary. You're not going to be implementing it forever. It has a defined outcome, which is a learning and development software that you are installing. And it has a unique, and it's unique because it's not something you do every day, right? Or you're constructing a new office building, for example, that's a project because it's temporary, it's a unique endeavor, and it is bringing a defined outcome. Things that are not project, for example, are, your company regularly takes goods from a supplier. You are able to, you take those goods every month, every 2 months. It might be a big exercise, but it's in itself not a project. Or manufacturing of your company's product line or whatever services it is you give. Now, depending on the kind of company, right? Maybe if you are a services company, you can probably say every service you deliver. Maybe you are a consulting company. Maybe every consulting endeavor can be treated as a project. But let's say you are in the line of manufacturing goods, for example, your production line is not a project, right? So it's usually good to understand what are projects and what are not projects, right? So now that we have like a fundamental understanding of what a project is and what it is not, what is project management then, right? Project management is the use of skills, knowledge, tools, and techniques to drive an event or a task, basically to drive a project to achieve its intended value. All right. So if I have a project, I have a timeline, I have the deliverable, and I have I have what I'm aiming at to deliver with the project. How do I go about guiding the team's work to ensure that we meet those deliverables, right? So the goal of project management is producing a complete project that meets its objectives. So there are many projects that start and they don't meet their objectives. There are so many of them. I mean, in daily life, you see projects, even buildings, for example, that, you see a building that has started and hasn't completed because of several issues, right? So project management is that driving force that makes sure once we start a project, we are doing it as efficiently as possible in order to get the deliverables that we wanted to get out of the project. And we do those within the constraint of mainly 4 guidelines, right? 4 objectives. There's time, there's costs, there's scope, and there's quality. And these guidelines or these objectives are not complementary, right? They are usually pulling against each other. And project management is kind of like the art of making sure that even though they are not complementary, you are extracting maximum value across the 4 of them. Now, the reason I say they're not complementary is, so time is how much time, well, the duration that you've already planned for the project, like, right? So you've said, I'm going to achieve this thing within 6 months. Now, the cost is the budget you've allocated to the work, right? And the scope is really detailing what is going to be delivered by the project. And the quality is like the standard that you want from the project. Now, if I, for example, reduce the time allocated to a project, let's say I started the project and I thought I had 6 months to complete the project. If I reduce the time, most likely my cost will go up if I want to keep the same scope and achieve the same quality, right? So let's say I'm building a car and I have only 6 months. I have 3 months to build the car instead of 6 months now. I will have to hire more engineers to work on the car. So my cost goes up. The scope might remain the same. If I am allowing my costs to go up, therefore I'm hiring more people to work on that same project. And my quality might slip because I don't have as much time to go through maybe the QA, the testing that would normally go through for that project. So it's almost a push and pull game for some of these objectives, right? So my quality, if I increase my quality, my costs will go up, and maybe my time will also go up. And before you start a project, you've defined where you want each of these parameters to be. So your aim as a project manager is to ensure that you are managing these objectives. You are ensuring they're staying in line and they're not deviating from what you've initially set out to accomplish. So, I mean, with all I've said, project management is important because you are managing your budget and your timelines and your resources more efficiently. When you use the tools of project management, you are improving productivity and quality of work. You are mitigating the project risk and blockers more efficiently because, as a project manager, you are looking at the project risk. What are the things that can go wrong? What are the ways to mitigate the risk that might pop up in a few months or in a few weeks, and then you are improving the relationships with stakeholders because project management looks at the entire 360 degrees of the project and make sure you're not only doing the project well, you are also communicating with the project stakeholders, right? The people that are impacted by the project. So that is why project management is important. And that's why, regardless of the industry you are in, you most likely have project managers, or you could benefit from the tools that project management brings, or you could work with project managers within the organization to deliver your projects more efficiently. So, I mean, with all that I said about project management, it's also now we speak on who is a project manager, right? Because you can speak of project management, but then you still need the human resource that is responsible for implementing that project, those project management tools or the project management methodologies. And that's where project management comes in. A project manager leads the project team, and depending on the type of project it is, the business need, the expertise working on the project, and the resources available during the project, right? So a project manager is there to oversee the project from start to finish. Project manager isn't, you don't have to be a subject matter expert to be a project manager. So a project manager in construction, for example, might not be a construction expert, but a project manager understands what the tasks they are required to meet the goals that have been set out and ensure that all those tasks are completed in time and are completed to the quality that has been set out initially. So, like I said initially, also blockers, foreseeing blockers and mitigating them and ensuring they don't impede your project success is a very important role of a project manager. So I've just highlighted here what I think are the top priorities of a project manager, right? So you're identifying the goals and the needs of the project, the scope. You're documenting it because it's very important when you start a project to understand what the project goal is. You'll be surprised how many projects start without understanding what the goal is, what the scope is. And once you start a project that way, it's only going to become what we call a never-ending project, right? Because you don't have an end date in mind, or you don't have an end scope in mind. You don't know what you're delivering. So as a project manager, when you come in, you are there to kind of give guidance to what is going on. So you're there to understand what the project goals are, what the scope is. You understand what the task and the deliverables are, the milestones during that project. And you are planning, you are monitoring, you are documenting throughout the life cycle of that project. So monitoring is very important, right? Because it's one thing to have a goal. It's another thing to ensure that you are monitoring your progress as you go along to make sure that you're on track to achieving that goal, right? And that's one of the important things a project manager brings to a project. And you're also communicating effectively with stakeholders. I cannot emphasize enough how important communication to stakeholders is, right? So let's say you're doing a project in your organization, and one of the stakeholders are maybe the CEO, the IT manager, the HR manager, and you have your project team, which is everybody else that's working on the project. Communicating to those stakeholders is just as important as doing the work that you're doing, right? Because it's ensuring that everybody is kept up to date, and whatever challenges might come up later in the life cycle of the project, you are communicating those well ahead to the stakeholders. They're understanding where you are. It's also, when you're doing a project, the last thing you want is somebody to come in and, tell you, do this or do that, this in a different way. And you have to go back and explain, the reason we're doing this is X, Y, and Z. If you communicate well enough and you are updating your stakeholders with the project status, it does a lot. It goes a long way to ensure that you are successful in your project, right? And you are also eliminating risk. Risk is one thing that comes up a lot when you're doing project management. So, for example, a risk is basically something that can happen that can impact the project positively or negatively, right? So, if I am delivering goods, or if as part of my project there's a logistics aspect, for example, one of the risks is that there's going to be a delay in delivery of my goods in order to use it in accomplishing that project. So I like to use construction because everybody knows construction, right? If I am, or let's even say a software project or a learning project, one of my risks could be I might have a delay in getting engineers to work on the project. Now, one of the ways I could mitigate that risk is to source my engineers from two different companies, right? Instead of having, if I outsource my sourcing, for example, I can source from two different companies instead of one. That way, I am mitigating the risk that there's going to be a delay in getting engineers, because I am now exposing my sourcing to two different vendors, and therefore I mitigate the risk that one of them will not deliver the right amount of resources on time. So risk, stakeholders are two important things you need to look out for in a project, in a project, right? So as Demola just put in the chat, negative risk event is a loss, positive risk is an opportunity, right? So a positive risk is something that you can capitalize on during the delivery of your project. Now, we'll talk briefly about project management lifecycle. Project management lifecycle is basically it's basically the steps, right, that you would go through in delivering a project, right? The order of processes, the phases that you would go through in delivering a project. And regardless of the methodology you adopt in delivering your project, whatever activity you're doing at a certain point of time is going to fall under one of these phases, right? So you're either going to be initiating your project, or you're planning it, or you're executing, or you're doing monitoring and control, or you're closing your project, right? So your project management methodology might impact the sequencing of the life cycle, which we'll get into in a bit, but you will still be going through these project management life cycle phases in order to accomplish your project goals. So we'll go through each of these life cycle phases, and we'll just talk briefly on what they are and how they how we use them, or what we do in each of these phases, right? Starting from project initiation. Like it says, or like the name implies, project initiation is where you define what the project will achieve or will deliver with the project sponsor and stakeholders to agree on expected deliverables. Like I mentioned earlier, there are lots of projects that don't have agreed expected deliverables. It is in your project initiation phase that you say, what is the project scope? What are we trying to achieve with this project? Who are the project stakeholders? And what is the budget for this project? It's very important you identify these things, even if you come into a project. So there are times where, as a project manager, you come into a project that is already in progress, right? And then you are brought in as a project manager. It's important to go back and make sure that the scope of a project, these things are well documented or well agreed among the stakeholders, right? Before you dive headfirst into doing a project. Now, scope is very important. Scope basically means, what are the parameters in which we are executing this project. There's something known as scope creep or requirement creep. Now, scope creep is when the project requirements keeps increasing over the project lifecycle, right? So you start a project and they say you are implementing, let's say, a new process for one department. That's your project. And then halfway into the project, you're told it is 2 departments now. And then 3 months later, they say it's 3 departments. Or you have a product that you want to implement and you agree it's 1 feature. And then, you come back later and then it's 2, it's 3. And the time you're using to implement the project just keeps increasing. That's scope creep. The scope of the project keeps increasing. And that's usually down to not documenting or agreeing on what the scope is at the beginning of the project with the project sponsor or the key stakeholders of the project, right? And then, depending on the kind of organization you work in, project management staff or project management professionals are often given a budget to run a project. So you're building a house, you have, X million amount of dollars to build it. You need to have that agreed ahead of the project. Excuse me. You need to have that agreed ahead of the project in order to ensure that you don't get any surprises down the line in executing that project, right? So project initiation is a very important part of the project, and it's often good to produce like a project charter or a project initiation document at this stage. It's basically a document that says, this is the scope, this is what we're trying to achieve, this is the timeline in which we're trying to achieve it, and this is the budget we have for the project. And often in some organizations, you have a sign-off of that project charter or project initiation document. So it's well documented what we are trying to achieve with this project. And once you've gone through a project initiation, next thing is you need to start planning that project, right? So planning a project, you're basically highlighting the milestones, the dates, the completion dates. Milestones are basically like, deliverables, right, within the scope of that project. They're not the full deliverable, but there are some that you are aiming for during the project delivery. So If, for example, I'm delivering a software project, my milestone might be delivering the landing page is one milestone. Delivering the e-commerce module is another milestone. And I am giving dates to these milestones. Now, milestones are very important because if I miss a milestone, it helps me in my calculation or in my monitoring of the project. I have missed this milestone. What's down the line does missing that milestone imply? And how can I get back on track even though I have missed the date for a milestone? Right. So in the project planning phase, you are defining what your milestones are, you're defining what your tasks are, you are outlining the resources that you have for the project, and you are determining what the associated activities are within that project. This is where you most likely come out with a Gantt chart, or what most people call a project plan, right? And also the methodology you are going to follow. This is where this is the stage at which you define that methodology, right? How am I going to go about delivering this project? What are the people I'm going to be working with to deliver this project? What does the project plan look like? At this stage, depending on the methodology you use, if it's a well-known activity, for example, and you have a template, you can probably define with a great degree of specificity what the different steps are to achieve the project and what the duration for each step is going to be. So I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. It's going to take me 2 weeks. It's going to start on this date and it's going to finish on this date. That's for some projects you can have up to that level of detail, and you're basically during the execution of the project, you're making sure you stick to those milestones or those deliverables or those tasks. For some projects, there's something called progressive elaboration, which is you have a high level view of what the milestones are, and then as you go along, you get more detail on the actual deliverable, but you have already as much as possible put in all the details you can get in planning that project, right? Then, so you've done your project initiation, you've done your project planning. Next thing is you're executing your project. And this is where, this is probably what most people are familiar with when it comes to projects. This is when your team is actually working to deliver the details of the project plan to meet the objectives that you set forth for your deliverables or for your stakeholders or the sponsor, right? And you are executing as a project manager, really, when the execution of the job of the project is happening, what you're doing is you're managing the workflows, you're ensuring that what you've planned is being delivered as documented. If there are changes or corrective actions that need to be taken into consideration, you need to adapt your plans, or you have some risk that have come to light that you need to mitigate, or you need to put in some new risk have come forward. Those are the actions that a project manager is taking during the project execution phase, right? So a project manager usually isn't the one doing the actual work. So let's say you're doing a software project. You have a team of software engineers. As a project manager, you might not be the one doing the coding, right? You're most likely not going to be the one doing the coding, but you are there to understand what challenges are being faced, what deliverables are being worked on, and what you're able to forecast what the deliverables will be and in what state would they be when you are hitting the milestones that you set forth, right? Now, project monitoring and controlling and project execution typically happen simultaneously, right? Because a lot of the things you're doing in execution, you are using project monitoring to make sure that they are on track, right? So where are we at any given point in the project versus where should we be according to the project plan? And it's also part of the communication project monitoring also involves that communication to the stakeholders, right? Because as you are looking at where we should be versus where we are, you're also communicating this to the project stakeholders to ensure that everybody is aware of the project status, right? Or how well the project is going. Communication is very important in running the project, right? You have to be as open as possible to ensure that everybody is well aware of the status of the project. And you are doing this by monitoring the project, and you are also doing, what we like regular project check-ins, depending on the methodology you're using. You are checking in if you're using Agile, for example, you have your daily scrums. So there are different ways in which you are able to visualize the progress of your project, and you are able to monitor the progress of the project. And then at the end of the project execution, you have to close the project, right? It's very important to have a defined closed project when you're done with your project execution, because at this point is where you are sure that the deliverables have been accepted by the business, and depending on the kind of organization you run, you disband the project team, right? So we've done the activities required to accomplish this project. We've met the quality requirements, we've met the scope requirements, we've met the cost requirement, we've met the time requirement, and we've delivered the final product to the client. Now, there might be some value you've provided during the life cycle of the project already, but depending on what methodology, I keep saying, depending on what methodology, there might be some value already deployed. But then it's also very important that you close any formal contract or agreement, and you do an audit of what went well in the project. You learn from how the project was executed, what was done right, what didn't go as planned, and that will inform subsequent projects. If you have like a project management office in your organization, that would be part of the knowledge base that will be used for future projects. But it's just a really good habit to ensure that you do a formal closure of your projects, to ensure that you are sure that the deliverables that you've delivered have been accepted by the business, and you are able to move on to your next project, right? So I've spoken a lot about the methodology. Well, I've touched on it, right? So let's just talk about what the methodology is, right? A project methodology is one of the most important things you have to decide when you're executing a project or you're planning a project, right? Because it defines how you will approach that project and what workflows you would be using in order to accomplish that project. The two most popular, I would say, methodologies, or the ones that you will most likely come across more often, Waterfall and Agile, right? So I will go into details of what Waterfall and Agile methodologies are and how you might use them and what the choice of methodology means relating to your project execution. Right? Now, what is Waterfall methodology? It's a sequential approach to delivering value or executing your project. And it's often looked at as the traditional way of managing your project, right? It's a very straightforward, I would say it's very straightforward way of running a project, right? So you start at requirements gathering, for example, you design, you implement, you test, and you deploy, right? It's a very sequential way of running through a project. Let me just go to the next slide and show you an example, right? So when you say waterfall, it's basically mimics what you see at a waterfall, where it is that you have a cliff and then you move down to a lower level, and then from that level you move down to a lower level. It's like a cascading effect, right? So once you start the project, for example, right, you've agreed on the requirements, you've signed off. And a way to look at this, one of the ways to look at this is, for example, I'll go back to construction, right? You have a building plan, right? Or you start with requirements. I want to build a 5-story building. That's your requirement. You go to an architect and say, what is the design? Give me a design for this building. You get a design. You agree on the design, you shake hands, you sign off on that design. And then you get that design, you hand it over to a civil engineer. He implements that design. Well, test, I don't know, test in the context of the big building, but you test it, like in a software environment, for example, you would test what you've implemented and then you would deploy it for use, right? So I want to build an e-commerce website. I do a requirement, I do a design, I implement, I test, and then I deploy it for use for everybody. It's a very, very sequential way of looking at things. And the one of the shortfalls of using a waterfall methodology, for example, is for example, you've done a design and you started implementing, and then you find out during implementation that there was a problem with the design or there's a problem with the requirements. It's very difficult with waterfall methodology to go back and rectify what has been done, because you've kind of closed off what happens at the previous phase, and there's very little overlap on what happens in the previous phase with the current phase, right? But it's also a very predictable way of doing projects. So if it's maybe your organization runs projects, a certain type of project for different clients, and you are very, very you've nailed down what the project plan looks like for delivering that project. It's requirement, design, implementation, test, deployment. You're running through those phases, and a lot of organizations use waterfall methodology. There's nothing wrong with it, depending on the kind of project you are trying to deliver, right? Now, the other methodology that is also used right now is agile methodology. And this is a more iterative design and build process, right? You are delivering incremental value with agile methodology. So you're planning, you're executing, you're reviewing, and then you're planning again, you're executing, and you're delivering. It's very well suited to tasks that you are able to run through and give and release, bits and bits of value. So, for example, I have a software and I want to I'm building a software platform and I want to introduce different products or different pages or different functionalities along the line. So I build maybe my landing page, and then based on that, I look at my requirements again. I modify that. I build the e-commerce model. I look at that. I build the communication model or the collaboration model. It's a very iterative model where you're running through and you're tracking and you're planning as you're doing all this, right? It's very well suited to software projects or any project that you are able to deliver it in form of increments. And you are able to also easily adapt, right? When you're using agile methodology, you're able to adapt to the needs of the end customer, right? You for example, you deliver the e-commerce model, and then you test it, and then you find out there's a bug in it or there is something missing in it. You're able to quickly, in the next iteration of value that you're going to deliver, rectify that fault, and then move on to delivering more value. And there's a lot of collaboration that goes on in agile methodology, because you're going through that cycle over and over again in order to deliver incremental value to your end users. And there are two very under agile methodology, also two very, very popular methodologies under agile, right? Or two subsets of agile. There's Scrum and there's Kanban. Now, Scrum is a very popular agile delivery framework, and it's simple to implement. It's really about breaking your work down to managing teams, and there's a lot of teamwork, there's a lot of collaboration, and there's a lot of incremental value that you use in Scrum. And I'm sure everybody has heard of Scrum. Well, I would assume a lot of you have heard about Scrum during your day-to-day work, or when you talk to people that are into software delivery. Now, Scrum is very unique because it has some prescriptive ways in which things are to be done if you are adopting Scrum methodology. With Scrum, you have a product manager, for example, and you have a Scrum master, you have the Scrum team, and then you are holding, I think the next slide will actually show, what Scrum looks like end to end. So you have a product backlog, basically says, this is what we're trying, this is the list of things we're trying to achieve in this project. From that product backlog, you prioritize that product backlog. These are the top, you basically arrange the product backlog to show what are the top items we're going to be working on in the next coming weeks. Now, you do a sprint planning meeting. A sprint basically is a 2 to 4 weeks period in which you are executing every batch of work you've assigned, right? So I have a product backlog that has 5 items. Now, I do a sprint planning and say, out of this product backlog, I am going to take one of these product items and break it down into the work items I need to accomplish it. So I'm going to do this bunch of work in these next 2 weeks. Now, that's what you do in your sprint planning meeting. And then that becomes your sprint backlog. So in this 2 weeks, I am going to achieve X, Y, and Z that I have taken from my product backlog. And a sprint is really just a time period, right? So most organizations use 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, depending on how quickly the team is able to deliver or iterate through their work, right? So my sprint backlog is what I am planning to achieve in this 4 weeks. I'm trying to accomplish this task. It makes up my sprint goal, basically. And one of the unique things about sprint is that you have a daily scrum. A daily scrum is a meeting where you meet, the scrum master or the project master meets with the scrum team, which is the team that is working on that project, and you speak on the progress that is being done and what blockers you are facing on your task that has been assigned to each of the project team members, right? So in that 2 weeks, I am meeting with my team members every day. We're going through what the work we are trying to accomplish is, and we're also highlighting where we need help, where we need collaboration, and what are the blockers that we're facing in our work. So it's a very collaborative way of working. You define what the sprint backlog is, you work on that sprint backlog, you meet daily to understand how the progress is, and at the end of that sprint, you have your finished sprint goal, right? You finished your sprint goal. Now, you also have something called a sprint review, which is you're reviewing with the stakeholders. This is what we've accomplished in this sprint, and these are the deliverables that have come out of this sprint. So they're able to review it, they're able to test it, they're able to give you feedback. And then you also have something called the sprint retrospective, which is a meeting where you look at that sprint and say, okay, these are the things that went wrong, these are the things that went well. So as you see, there's a lot of communication that goes on if you're adopting the Scrum methodology. And that's why it's really well suited for work where you have incremental value and you are working with a small team that is delivering that value. It's really well documented, the ways in which you can deliver value through sprints. And there are also there are a lot of software tools right now that you can use to accomplish sprints, planning, running your sprints and things like that. I'll go through those in the next couple of minutes once we run through this slide. Now, Kanban is the second agile methodology, and it's less prescriptive than Scrum. It's not, it has less steps that you have to work through. Right? Kanban really is focused on visualizing the workflow, limiting work in progress, and making it explicit. So what Kanban looks like really is you have a visual representation of what your work looks like. So you've listed your backlog, like those are the things I need to do in order to accomplish or deliver this project. And I am able to move tasks between the backlog, in progress, and done, right? So I have done this task. I have this task, X and Y tasks listed in the backlog. I am now doing X and Y task, which are in progress, and I have done X and Y tasks. And you are also assigning those tasks to your team members, right? So anybody within the team can come and look at the Kanban board, for example, and say, oh, we have X, Y, and Z, or we have 5 things in progress, and those 5 things are being handled by these team members. It's very good to visualize where you are in delivering your value, right, to your end users. And it's less, like I said, there's no sprint planning, there's really no Scrum or anything like that. You're just visualizing how you're moving across the different stages of work. And you can do this with software. You can actually even just have a whiteboard in your organization that you use a sticky note on each of the columns, and you just move the notes from one column to another as you progress through the work. And like I said, so you're moving from doing to done, or backlog, in progress, done. And you are also trying to limit how many things you're doing at a certain amount of, or a certain period of time. Right. So Kanban is agile, but it's less prescriptive agile than Scrum. So let me just quickly run through a Gantt chart, for example. A Gantt chart you've probably seen a Gantt chart if you are working with a project manager, right? It's very suited to waterfall methodology, where you have a design phase, for example. And like I said, in the waterfall methodology, you've highlighted what are the things I need to do in my design phase. And then what are the things I need to do in the implementation phase? What are the things I need to do in my testing phase? You have your timeline, which is your start and your end dates, and you're tracking the progress against each of these milestones, right? So if I am running a project, for example, and I'm using waterfall methodology, I would very much be maintaining a Gantt chart, because I am able to, during my regular check-ins with my stakeholders, I'm able to show visually, this is where we are in delivering the project. And you can do this in Excel. There are many templates in Excel actually to do this, or you can have a software that does this for you. The RAID log is another tool that you have when you're executing a project. RAID log basically is it's a collection of the risk, assumptions, issues, and decisions you are making as you are executing the project, right? So with the RAID log, I am able to highlight what are the risks, how am I mitigating them, what are the risks that have become issues, and how am I also resolving them. It's just something to keep an eye on to ensure that there are no surprises during the execution of your project. And yeah, just quickly run through what the different certifications you can probably look at when you're doing project management. Now, you can be a project manager and not have these certifications, right? But what the certification does is it's a show of the knowledge you've gained that you are applying to effective project management. And there are different bodies out there that run each of these project management certifications. There are different methodologies that are used in running. If you subscribe to one of these, methodologies, right? So the PMP is probably one of the most well-known project management certifications run by PMI. And then you have Prince 2 also. But then for Scrum, you also have the professional Scrum Master, you have the certified Scrum Master, and then you have the Google Project Management Certificate, which you can also take, right? Depending on, what kind of project you are running, you probably want to look at taking or reading up for one of these certifications. Professional Scrum Master is very interesting, if you are trying to run agile projects, or certified Scrum Master. I think PMI also has an agile form of their PMP certification, or it's been embedded in it. I'm not very clear about that right now, but these are some of the certifications you can actually look at in order to facilitate or improve your knowledge of project management. So just in the next couple of minutes, I just want to run through what project management looks like when we are using, especially the agile project management tools, right? So just give me 1 minute to show you that. So can you see this board? Yeah. Now, okay, this is Jira. It's a project management software that is used a lot right now, especially if you are running agile projects. You can get a Jira account free of charge. I think there are some limitations if you are getting it for personal use, but you can start using Jira for your projects, almost immediately if you sign up for an account. I'm not in any way affiliated with Jira. It's just one of the tools. There are others out there like Monday.com, I think, right? Also, there's Microsoft projects, but I just wanted to give you a look at what running a project looks like in Jira, for example, right? So this is a Kanban board in Jira, and this is a sprint in Jira. So let's run through the Kanban board. Now, this is, for example, I have 3 lanes or 3 statuses for my project. I have to do, I have in progress, and I have done. Depending on the kind of work, you can have multiple statuses for your project, right? So what you can see, first of all, is that when I come here with my project team, I'm able to see how I am progressing in delivering this project. So for example, I want to create my backlog. So maybe one of the things I need to do is email sponsors as part of the work I want to do. It's still something I am going to do, so it's still to do. I can assign it, for example, to one of my team members, and I can label it, let's say it's part of, a setup task. I can show who reports it. And then there's another thing you can do is you can show how it is linked to other tasks, right? So this task, is it blocked by another task? Is it blocking another task? Is it duplicating another task? So there are many ways in which you can set it up. And then let's say I want to show my status to my stakeholders. I can easily come to Jira and say, this is what we have done. Once we complete something, for example, I just drag it into the next column, and it shows that we are now, doing this activity. It shows who is doing that activity. And then once I am done with sending out meeting invites, for example, I can also drag it and it's a completed task. So with this way of looking at things, for example, I am able to very quickly assign my task. I'm able very quickly show reporting. There are also reports that you can also automatically get from Jira once you've put in your backlog. So in Jira, for example, this to-do list will be my backlog. So I have all this backlog, and then I am able to move my tasks to in progress, or I'm able to move them to done. There are other things you should probably know about Agile, right? In way you sequence your task, or the way you, the different type of tasks you have. So you have epics, you have stories, and you have tasks. But those are, I think, those are not within the scope of a fundamentals course, unless we're looking specifically at Agile. And I can just encourage you to just read up on what are epics, what are stories, and what are tasks in the context of Agile methodology, right? Now, this is Kanban. I can also, with Jira, create create what is known as a Scrum. A project using Scrum methodology. Now, this is a project I have created using Jira for a sample Scrum project, right? So I have my backlog, which is the same thing of, like I said, which is what are the tasks that we intend to get done. So it says, what needs to be done. So let's say email participants. Like I said, there are other things you need to look at when you are doing Agile, like epics. There are ways in which people also frame the stories, like the way in which you document your stories. But just for this demo, I'm just going to use something very easy for us to look at. So I'm saying I'm emailing participants. Now, this is the backlog, and this is a sprint. A sprint is, like I said, it's a time-boxed period of time in which we want to deliver some value. Now, the sprint running between the 10th of July and the 24th of July, these are the 3 things I want to accomplish in that sprint, right? So in Jira, it's very easy to create a sprint. For example, I can just click on create sprint, and it's created another 2-week sprint for me that is going to come up after the first sprint is done. And I can, based on what I know, set up some of my tasks to be included already in that second sprint, right? So I have 2 sprints now, and I have a backlog. My first sprint is running between 10th and 24th of July. My second sprint is going to be between 24th of July and 7th of August. So I have planned my work out based on the value I'm going to be delivering for each sprint. Now, for the sprints, I can now, so I have my backlog, I have my sprints. Now, my board, for example, will now be in this sprint that I'm in, how am I progressing with the work in this sprint? So this is basically, looks like a Kanban board, but it is within the context of a sprint, right? So I am also managing my work within this sprint. And my goal really is to complete all the tasks I have defined for a sprint within the time I have assigned to that sprint. And there are different ways in which you can then monitor or report your progress. There are things like burn down, sprint burn down, sprint burn up charts, team velocity. There are other how should I put it, metrics that you can look at when it comes to using a sprint or using Jira or any software, for example, to manage your software project or your learning project or whatever project it is you are running. So it's up to you on how you want to sequence your work. But this basically is it's just an overview of if I am using Jira and I'm trying to use Scrum or I'm trying to use Kanban, this is what it looks like on a day-to-day basis. So during my sprints, my daily Scrum, what I'm doing is I'm looking at this board and I'm saying, what are the tasks we have in progress? What do we need to do to move those tasks from in progress to done? The tasks that we're still in to do, when are we going to be able to move them to in progress? Are there any blockers? And I'm running through each of these tasks with my project team in order to ensure that we meet that sprint goals. And then once we are done with the sprint, we complete the sprint. Normally, any task that you have left over in a sprint, you can either move it back into your backlog, or you move it into the next sprint to accomplish it, right? So if it is a task that you are unable to do for some reason, and you need some more resources or something for it, you can move it back into the backlog. Or if it's just something that you need more time to accomplish, you can move it into the next sprint and continue working on it. Yeah, so what I was talking about is, so you have epics, you have stories, and then you have tasks. Those are just basically, and then you have bugs depending on the kind of, so if I wanted to create they're called work items, right? So you have an epic. An epic it's a much larger piece of work that you're trying to accomplish. A story it's if you break down an epic, you have different stories within that epic that you are going to use to accomplish the task, the goal of that epic. So let's say my epic is to deliver a landing page. Part of my stories can be deliver the header, deliver the content, deliver the footer of the page. Those are the stories under that epic. Now, under those stories, I can break those stories down into tasks. Now, what are the tasks under those stories? So epic is the big top level. A story is underneath the epic, or several stories are within that epic. And within these stories, you have your task. So that's a way of visualizing what an epic is, a story is, and what a task is. All right. So yes, I think that's all the material I wanted to cover today. I know it's been a lot of material or a lot of information to assimilate. So yes, if there are any questions or Demolan, yes.